On the economic front, COVID-19 has already taken its toll on almost all the economies of the world, and it is expected hardly 28 international economies, 28 countries out of some more than 260 countries of the world are expected to post some decent growth in the year, which is affected by COVID. So, the effect of the COVID 19, not only during 2021, but also in the coming year too, maybe more than that, will be continued to be felt by the world economy and obviously by the Indian economy. So, amidst these challenges posed uh, by the pandemic, the FM had its task cut out on every front. Revenue was under pressure. The economy was almost turning like the in the stagflation or maybe depression. Businesses were getting shut down. General tone of the overall economy, sub businesses, I mean majority, particularly SME, were facing the dire challenges of the survival, and so it was a sort of a very gloomy atmosphere everywhere. And the one apprehension which everybody had in mind, that what the finance minister would do in the context of the raising of the additional resources. Will there be a additional tax burden? Will there be some sort of a COVID cess? These are the certain larger questions which the common man would always be asking. People were also apprehensive about the other changes on the income tax front. And it is to the credit of the finance minister that she has actually not gone by the temptation of raising the revenue by raising the taxes. Instead of this, chartering a very unconventional path, the finance minister has been bold enough to push the growth or push India into the growth trajectory by announcing certain bold and revolutionary measures. I'm not going into it. In fact, economic survey and certain macro aspects of the budget, in the context of the micro aspects of the budget which relate to the taxation, generally I would have loved to go into it, but I know I have a lot to cover today, so I would not go too much into the detail. But let me simply go by the six pillars which the finance minister spoke about, as the pillars on which the edifice of the union budget 2020 21-22 is resting. And those, it is a part of his para 27 of our budget speech. And those are the six pillars: health and well-being, physical and financial capital and infrastructure, the inclusive development for aspirational India, reinvigorating the human capital, innovation and R&D, and minimum government and maximum governance. So, by the way, uh, Bharat bhai, everybody is able to hear?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Right. Fine. Okay. Now, out of these six pillars, the last one is also very interesting: minimum government and maximum governance. And this minimum government and maximum governance obviously also somewhere coincide with the micro level proposals of the budget, and that is uh, and that micro level proposal is the taxation related proposals. And we will just see how this last pillar uh, you know can be you know is reflected on the at least indirect tax related proposals of the budget. Another important aspect is just giving you some bare figures. If you see the budget at a glance on the receipt part of the budget, the union budget 2021 had budgeted, the budget estimate for the GST total was approximately in the region of about 6,90,500 crore. This is for CGST. And compensation cess was pegged at 1,10,500 crore. This was revised as per the revised estimate of the union budget. It is now 5 lakh 15,100 crore. From 6 lakhs 90,500 crore, this is only for CGST. 5 lakh 90,100 crore CGST plus compensation cess. This is a marked, you know, reduction in the budget estimates, mainly because of the COVID pandemic situation. What is more interesting is that as against the revised estimate of 5 lakh 15,100 crore for the current year, the for the next year 21-22, the union budget expects 6 lakh 30,000 crore, so about 1 lakh 15,000 crore additional income, which is still lesser than the 6 lakh 90,000 and odd crore which was originally pegged at, uh, as per the original budget estimate for the current year. So, see, the finance minister is being realistic as far as the projections from the revenue from the GST revenue is concerned. And this is despite the fact that for December and January, the GST collection had actually gone beyond 1 lakh 15,000 crore and 1 lakh 20,000 crore respectively. So she is not getting carried away by these figures, but instead of that, remaining firmly on the ground as far as her projections about the GST revenue is concerned. There are there are many steps which have been taken in this budget on the GST front as well, which are aimed at protecting the revenue and also augmenting the revenue, albeit without tinkering the rates of the GST. The tariff rationalization, all the amendments, 16 amendments which have been actually uh, proposed by this budget, all relate to the statutory amendments. The rationalization of GST tariff rates which is ongoing exercise, will be now undertaken, which is the next item on the agenda. I am expecting that another 6 months or so, we will see massive changes as far as the tariff rates are concerned. We will also witness lot many other statutory amendments in the coming month. I wouldn't be surprised if there is a CGST Amendment Act 2021 which would be tabled in the coming years, in the coming year. I'm expecting that. A lot of revamping of the statutory amendments is on cards. So with this background, let us now take up the proposals of the Finance Bill 2021, 21-22 on the customs front. Next slide, please. Next. Before we come to the actual proposals, friends, one should be always very clear about the date of effect of the various clauses of the bill. I have everywhere I have referred to the clauses of the bill as clauses only and not as the section. I don't know. I mean, generally, when the bill is enacted after the president accords his assent, then it becomes the act, and the clause of the bill is getting converted into the section. Before that, generally, the provisions of the finance bill are generally actually described as a clause only. So I'm a bit old-fashioned man. So everywhere I have referred to it as a clause only. So relevant clauses of the bill which contains the customs related provisions are clauses 80 to 98, and date of effect of the proposed amendment. All these amendments will be effective from the date of enactment of the bill and not from the date to be notified by the central government after the enactment of the bill. Please see clause 1, subclause 2, subclause C, 1B, 1, 2, sorry, B of the finance bill, which speaks about which clauses will take effect from which date. There are generally 4 dates you would find in any finance bill nowadays. The one, the amendments which would become effective on the date of enactment of the bill. 2, amendments which would become effective from the date to be notified by the central government after enactment of the bill. 3, amendments which are given immediate effect by the provisional collection of taxes at 1931. You would find this always at the end of the last schedule of the finance bill. There is a 2 line you will always find, provisional collection of taxes at 1931, by which certain proposals, generally tariff related proposals, are all given immediate effect under this PTC Act. And the fourth one, generally in the context of income tax, the amendments which would be given effect normally from the 1st April of the following financial year. So we have to be very careful as far as the date of effect of the all the amendments, and this will also take care of if any clause, any particular amendment is also being given retrospective effect. So I'll explain to that as we proceed. So all the customs related, somewhere I found many comments and many, the learned authors' views that date of effect of the custom related amendment will be from the date to be notified. I think there is some error here, because if you see section 1 subsection clause 1 subclause 2 of the finance bill, you would find that only from the all the bill, it is nowhere mentioning about uh, the this particular 80 to 98. So I'll look into it. So please keep this in mind. Coming to now, next, proposed amendments. The first amendment is the insertion of clause 7b into, whereby there is a proposal to set up a common portal for the common custom electronic portal under the for the normal operations of the custom act. This is something like the GSTN portal which is working under the GST regime. Next, and this is being done. There are two amendments, total four amendments pertaining to this common portal. The first, defining what is common portal by amending section 2 definition section. Section 154C, which says that the board may notify a common portal for the purpose of registration, filing of bills of entry, shipping bill, other document, forms, even payment of duty, and such other purposes that the board may notify. Section 149, which speaks about the amendment of the documents like bill of entry, shipping bill, etc., under certain specified circumstances. It can also be now done through the common portal, or that is what the intention is. However, the amendment of such important fundamental documents like bill of entry or shipping bill, etc., will be allowed subject to the risk evaluation through the appropriate selection criteria. It will not be allowed probably to be undertaken as a routine manner. And the section 153 is about the facility to be made available on the common portal. Next, yeah, it is, uh, you know, the entire taxation regime, be it income tax or indirect tax, including customs and GST, is galloping towards the digitization or the automation of their working and operations. There is a use of artificial intelligence in the tax administration is now in the full swing, and probably, as is being witnessed across the world, probably the tax revenue department or the tax department is much more ahead on this aspect than even the taxpayers. And there is every likelihood that over a period of time, the taxpayers will be tripping over certain unexpected, potholes, because they wouldn't be knowing that how my revenue officer was became aware about what I have been doing and where I have been spending or where I have been earning my income from, which I thought up till now it was always I've been able to avoid. There is an unprecedented, the automation of the entire tax administration is going on. Similarly, unprecedented coordination between the various taxation authorities is going on behind the bird. And we are now witnessing that how the income tax is also coming into picture immediately when there are frauds under customs or GST. Not only income tax and GST or customs and income tax, even PMLA, COFEPOSHA, all these acts and the action thereunder is being synchronized, and there is a continuous coordination going on. And the common portal for customs is, as I see this, has two purposes to serve. One, obviously, the digitization or automation also helps the revenue department to very closely and effectively monitor the overall international trade and the activities of the people engaged in the trade, and simultaneously coordinate with their counterparts in direct tax and GST. The second is it is actually aimed at avoiding the interaction and friction between the taxpayers and the departmental officers, which will indirectly also put a check on the corruption. So as we are already aware about the faceless assessment. No doubt, such the initiatives when implemented will always have a lot of teething problems. But this is going to be the reality of the day. We are on the path of no return as far as these particular initiatives are called. So, as I said, GST and portal will not now feel alone. She will have the sister in the form of the customs portal, common portal also. Next, the next comes to the conditional exemptions. The This is by being done Section 25, just like Section 11 of the CGST Act 2017 and Section 5A of the Erstwhile Central Excise Act, you know, the under which the exemption can be granted by the central government through the notification, either wholly or partially, either unconditionally or subject to certain conditions. This is basically the powers are vested in the central government under customs. A new subsection is proposed to be introduced uh, under Section 25, whereby a lifespan of the conditional exemptions is proposed to be restricted till 31st day of the March of the financial year, unless it is already, you know, rescinded, or there is a specific lifespan more than 2 years is already mentioned in the notification. Similarly, unless it is varied, so any variation in that is amendment in the conditional exemption notification will also have the 2 years time limit. And this exemption, any such, uh, suppose for the existing conditional exemption, the 2 years time limit will be required to be reckoned from the date of enactment of the bill, that is when the president's assent is received to the current finance bill 2021. So if it is received say on 15th March 2021, the 2 years period for the existing notification will be required to be computed from 15th March 2021. Next, if you see the para 177 and 170 of the 178 of the finance may be, this exercise about weeding out the outdated exemption notification has been on in customs for past more than 3 4 years, and now it has gathered momentum. The finance minister has already expressed her intention to scrape almost 400 old exemptions and also simultaneously introduce a revised custom duty structure which is expected to be free of distortions on October 1, 2021. This is a huge announcement, and it can have a tremendous impact on not only on the international trade in which the people are engaged, but also on the domestic trade as well. And it will be interesting to see that which 400 old exemption, it could be either way, figure can be here and there, but which exemptions are going to be exed in this massive exercise. Fortunately, the the withdrawal of all these conditional exemptions will be done only after inviting the suggestions from the trade and all the stakeholders. Undisputedly, this exercise is aimed at achieving the goal of the Atmanirbhar Bharat, because when on the imports exemption is given, more than often the you know the domestic trade suffers. At the same time, enabling India to be a major partner in the international trade, because once we develop our own domestic skill, we can, with new vigor and with new confidence, we can partner, we can become a major player in the international trade. It would be interesting to see that whether simultaneously the GST tariff restructuring will be undertaken or not. To what extent? It is definitely underway, and coming months will be very interesting on this aspect. But restructuring of the GST rate, which is a crying need of the hour, that restructuring coupled with the restructuring of the custom duty structure is expected to play a vital role in the economic growth of the country. I have always been saying for years and years that GST particularly is not merely a tax reform, it is not merely a business reform, it is not much more than that. It is also an economic reform, and in the context of the Indian taxpayer psyche as well as the tax officer psyche, GST is also a cultural reform. We will see how it is a cultural reform, but it is definitely an economic reform. So, restructuring of the GST rates, rationalizing even the exemptions, we have entire GST unfortunately is also saddled with number of exemptions, which is not a good thing. So one would only hope that the simultaneously GST rate structure will also be rationalized in a pragmatic manner, keeping the fundamental character or the one of the core the objective of the GST in mind, and that is allowing the seamless, uninterrupted credit or ITC to the buyer. When the exemptions step into the picture, the ITC is actually is denied, and then these distortions are created. One of the very one of the very noted internationally tax expert under VAT and GST, he is a German author, so very difficult to take his name, but he has very succinctly put the entire substance of the GST philosophy in these few words. He says GST, VAT, I mean, world over it is known as a VAT or GST. Australia it is GST, New Zealand it is GST, Canada it is GST, European Union it is VAT. So, I mean, we will use it as a synonymous. He has said that weight is a paradox. You know, the working on the philosophy of the credit mechanism, it is a system in which those who consider themselves as exempted are really taxed, and those who consider themselves as taxed are really exempted. If you have understood this, you have understood GST or VAT. Why somebody who is exempted is considered to be taxed? Because his purchases or procurement of goods or services are being on the payment of tax of which he cannot take the ITC. Therefore, he is indirectly taxed on the purchases, even though he is exempted for his output supplies. But when a person is taxed with the simultaneous benefit of ITC, he is effectively pays the tax only on the value addition. So this fundamental character, which is much, much more maligned under the current Indian GST system, keeping this in mind, one can always look forward to okay, the similar weeding out of the exemptions under GST would also be undertaken so as to ensure the seamless, uninterrupted flow of the ITC. Apart from bringing the more and more the taxpayer number of taxpayers within the tax fold, because India's all said and done taxpayer ratio to population is still very, very dismal. So October 21 could be the very interesting month, and that's why I'm tempted to say okay, whether the businesses will celebrate the next Diwali with renewed vigor and enthusiasm, because the this year Diwali obviously was completely spoiled by the COVID-19, but we may have a lot to look forward to. Another interesting thing to see would be whether the various notifications and the schemes pertaining to the exports, like 100% EOU scheme, foreign trade agreements related scheme, other export incentive schemes, which are notified and operated through the custom notification based on number of conditions, whether they will be exed. In my personal opinion, that will not be done. Uh, the initially the government glare will be only on those conditional exemptions which have remained on in force for no very justifiable reason for years and years. Next, again, this is a very interesting and very welcome amendment. For the first time in the history of indirect taxes, I would say, right from 1944 in excise, customs 1962, and service tax 1994, we have this type of initiative is being seen ever, and that is putting a clamp on the revenue officers investigating or inquiring any matter which ultimately is likely to culminate into the show cause notice. Under Section 28, subsection 1, the proper officer of customs can issue a show cause notice for the recovery of the custom duty short paid or not paid or refund erroneously granted, etc. Similarly, subsection 4 allows the proper officer to extend the time limit up to 5 years for the purpose of raising the demand. Now, what is being done through this new section? Section 28BB is being introduced under Customs Act, whereby if any inquiry or investigation is initiated under this act, which ultimately is culminating or likely to culminate in the show cause notice under Section 28(1) or 4, then the entire inquiry or investigation should be completed within a period of 2 years from the date of initiation of the audit, search, seizure, or summons, as the case may be. So, if a taxpayer is served with a summons even, say on 15th February 2021, for inquiring into some aspect of his custom related transaction, whether for valuation purpose or any other purpose, evasion, valuation, classification, whatever it may be, in respect of the transactions undertaken by him, that inquiry will have to be completed within a period of 2 years from 15th February 2021. And this period can be extended by the commissioner for the reasons to be recorded in writing by another 1 year only. While reckoning this period, if any stay is given by any court or tribunal against the ongoing inquiry or investigation, then obviously that period will not be counted. Similarly, this being the international custom being the involved into this, sometimes it may happen that the authorities may have to seek lot of information from an overseas authority through a legal process by involving the foreign jurisdiction in the picture. In that case also, whatever time they have taken in obtaining the information from the overseas authority, that would not be computed for the purpose of these 2 years. And the for the it is also mentioned, and this is also very welcome, is that this amendment will not apply to the ongoing proceedings which are already right now under the inquiry investigation stage before the enactment of the bill. So if the bill is enacted on 15th March 2021, then up to 15th March 2021, whatever inquiry investigation are going on, this time limit of 2 years will not be applicable. Next. As I said, this is a significant proposals, and uh, just like section 73 and 74 of the service tax and excise, I am not talking about the GST law. There is a relevant date concept. SOCOS notice is required to be issued within a period of 2 years or extended period of 5 years under customs from the relevant date. That relevant date is specified under clause 3 of the explanation 2 to section 28. Normally, we take it as a date of the payment of duty, that is bill of entry, within which. And now, this 2 years time limit is being introduced for the completion of the inquiry. One interesting question which will there are two, three questions do arise here. The one is, while the commissioner has been empowered to increase the time limit for investigation by 1 year, about 2 years, whether he is required to follow the principles of natural justice, and here the affected party who is being investigated, that I propose to extend the time limit by 1 year, or whether he can do this suo motu on his own, but for the reasons to be recorded in writing. Going by certain similar provisions in the different context, whereby the commissioner has been empowered to increase the time limit in certain circumstances, it appears that the party will not be heard or may not be required to be heard before the commissioner extends the time limit of these 2 years by another 1 year. However, he has to record the reasons, and the reasons should be valid and sound, and not because the officers were too busy to complete the inquiry or because they were mired into so many other things. So, therefore, the reasons should be sound enough for the commissioner to extend. Otherwise, it can itself become a matter of challenge. Another is, uh, I would, if you see very carefully, just please go to the previous slide. If you see the the subclause one, any inquiry or investigation under this act, culminating in the issuance of notice, shall be completed by issuing such notice within a period of 2 years from the date of initiation of audit, search, seizure, or summons. Now, this is very interesting. Inquiry or investigation is a broad, wide term, and during the course of an inquiry or investigation, a search or seizure may take place or may not take place. Inquiry may start with the summons, therefore, generally under Section 108. So, the summons will be the date from which 2 years time limit is required to be computed. However, audit is not an inquiry, audit is not an investigation, and date of initiation of summons is also not a very good grammatical phraseology. Initiation of audit is fine. Initiation of search is fine. But there cannot be initiation of seizure. There cannot be a date of initiation of summons. This could have been slightly better worded, and I would have personally wished that any inquiry or investigation or audit, at least that word should have found in the opening part of the section. But otherwise, the intention we should keep it in mind. Next. And the last thing is there a conflict between section 28 and the proposed provision 28BB? This may arise because of certain peculiar language of the new provision. As I said, section 28 provides for the time limit of 2 years from the date of payment of duty in the normal course when there is no evasion. I'm not talking about right now with the evasion. Let us assume that on 1st February 2021, an importer has filed the bill of entry. And on 1st February 2022, after 1 year, the assessing officer or the customs authority initiate the inquiry about the proper payment of the duty on that bill of entry imports. For whatever reason, because of valuation, classification, exemption notification, or for whatever reason, that is initiated after 1 year. Now, as per going by this new provision, suppose they got 2 years time limit to complete the inquiry, that is 1st February 2024. Bill of entry is filed on 1st February 2021. Inquiry initiated on 1st February 2022 and complete to be completed by 2024. But by 2024, if the notice is issued, it will be beyond the period of 2 years from the date of the bill of entry, that is 1st February 2021. This new provision does not allow the proper officer to extend the mandatory time limit prescribed for the issue of the SOCOS notice under section 28. It only speaks about the the completion of the inquiry or investigation within 2 years. If that completion, that 2 year period actually crosses with the 2 year time limit provided under section 28 for issue of the SOCOS notice, then section 28 will prevail upon this. This is something. So if it goes beyond 2 years, then the only way the demand can be justified by invoking the extended period for which there has to be a material establishing willful suppression or misdeclaration or fraud. This is one aspect which is required to be kept in mind. Personally, I feel that from the section 28BB subsection 1, the word issuance of the notice which are appearing, please go again previous slide. Any inquiry or investigation under this act culminating in the issuance of the notice under subsection 1 or subsection 4 of section 28 shall be completed by issuing such notice. This by issuing such notice words, in my personal opinion, are totally unnecessary here, and they are confusing, because the purpose can be served by simply saying that shall be completed within a period of 2 years, instead of saying shall be completed by issuing such notice. I would be personally, I would feel this can create a lot of issues around the interpretation of this particular very good provision, and I wish that by issuing such notice will be actually omitted by moving the amendment to the bill. Next. Another issues which will arise is whether these provisions would be applicable to section 28 AAA Basically, this is the recovery of duties in certain cases where certain instruments like drawback and other instruments are misused. Section 110, seizure of goods or documents and things. Section 118 and to 121 are relating to confiscation action. Section 124, issue of so-called notice before confiscation of goods. Some clarity may be required that the whether the new provision, going by the plain reading, it appears that the new provision should apply even to this action under these particular provisions also, but it would be ideal if the board clarifies after the bill is enacted. And another aspect is, it also appears that the new provision is being inserted in the larger context of the faceless assessment, which is going in the full swing under customs. Because once it is a faceless assessment, the it, the there is a possibility of some sort of a tinkering with the dates which are appearing when the inquiry was initiated, when inquiry was completed, when the so-called notice was issued and all. So this is in the larger context of the faceless assessment. I'm not further going on to this. If you see very interestingly, the the memorandum, the table to the budget, which is explaining in succinctly the various provisions, this particular provision has been put under efficiency and accountability. The and particularly efficiency is basically relating to section 46, which we will now see for filing the bill of entry, and obviously this comes under accountability. That reminds me, friends, the Dr. Partha Sarthi Shong historic report when tariff research advisory committee, that is the, and those recommendation in principle had been accepted by the new government. Unfortunately, majority of the recommendations are yet to be implemented. I have always hold the view that TARC, which is the Tariff Advisory Research Committee, also stands for the trust, accountability, the responsibility, and cooperation. Unless these four elements find its way in the framing of the tax laws and the implementation of tax laws, no amount of tax reforms or attempt to simplify the tax laws and increase the ease of doing business in India would really achieve the desired result. I would also personally look forward to the time where a similar type of provision is also introduced sooner rather than later under the GST Act also, whereby there is a claim or there is a specific time limit prescribed for the officers to they complete their inquiry and investigation, and not to drag it till just end of the 5 year period and then at the last minute allowing them to issue the evasion notices, charging the parties with the evasion, and then by invoking the extended period of limitation under section 74. So one could really hope for the similar provision to be introduced under the GST. Next, the this amendment section 46, which speaks about the bill of entry, there is a very subtle and very interesting amendment. For the time being, as of now, the bill of entry can be filed by an importer the before the end of the next day following the day. uh, this is now being replaced before the end of the this by saying that this bill of entry should be filed in the opening portion, the sorry, before the end of the day preceding the day. In other words, the bill of entry is required to be filed uh, before the end of the day on which the aircraft or vessel is expected to be allowed to come arrive in the custom station, and not on the next day of the arrival. And this is being mandated, uh, and therefore the importers will have to be on their alert. Next, coming to, this is another interesting amendment. As I mentioned, uh, this amendment I will just very briefly explain without going into the provisions. uh, Go to the next slide. There are three, four connected amendments into this. Come to the next. The overall sum and substance is Section 110 deals with the powers of the proper officer to seize any goods which he has reasons to believe are liable for confiscation. And considering the circumstances, the central government can notify the goods or the class of goods uh, which can be disposed of by the proper officer after seizure as soon as possible in the manner as prescribed. Now, for the disposal of these goods by the proper officer which are under seizure, he has to make an application to the magistrate. That magistrate would actually certify the correctness of the inventory prepared by the officer. He would also take the photographs of the seized good would also be taken in the presence of the magistrate, which again he would certify as true. And also, wherever in a given case, the samples are required to be drawn of the seized goods which are under disposal, then the list of the samples drawn will also be certified by the magistrate. Now, while keeping this entire provision intact, what is now being done that if the seized goods is in the form of gold in any form, then instead of making the application to the magistrate, the proper officer now will be required to make the application to the Commissioner Appeals, Customs, and not to the magistrate. And Commissioner Appeals is now invested with all the powers to undertake all the functions which otherwise a magistrate will be doing or is doing right now in respect of the other seized goods which are sought to be disposed of. So, and therefore the amendment, document amendment definition is also being amended to include the documents, photographs or the list which are certified by the Commissioner Appeals. So basically this, the view is there has been the smuggling of the gold has been under tremendous rise during last year because of the increase in the duty. Whenever the duty has been increased on the gold, this has been this has been always being witnessed. And for the and most of the time the smugglers also do not come forward, never apprehended, but the material is seized. Under these circumstances, to pave the way for the expeditious disposal of the gold which is seized for the violation of the Customs Act, the instead of approaching the magistrate, it is now provided that one can approach directly the Commissioner Appeals. So this has to be looked at it from that perspective, that the idea is to allow the department to dispose of or sell the seized gold as expeditiously as possible. Next, another important amendment is this is in line with the what is being witnessed nowadays under GST, and this is one has to be very carefully keep this particular provision in mind. What is being done is, friends, you are aware of that bogus or fake invoices and fraudulent availment of ITC on bogus and fake invoices is on actually rise like never before. Earlier, it was few days or month when such cases will come to the surface. Then it became almost alternate day. Then it became daily. And now, sometimes even it is a couple of hours, one would be flooded on the social media with the messages a particular person is apprehended by the department at such place involved into some 10 crore or 100 crore or 500 crore bogus billing and bogus credit. I mean, it is so much so, it is as if the issue of the bogus invoices has practically become a cottage industry. And keeping this in mind, one of the it is not simplicity the case of taking ITC, which can be utilized for the payment of the uh, GST on the outward supply. It is also always noticed that the bogus ITC is encased by the fraudster by showing the exports under refund claim. To plug this entire loophole and to check these rampant malpractices, these two amendments are being made. The first one is that under section 113, if any goods are entered for exportation under claim of remission or refund of any duty or tax or levy to make a wrongful claim for the in contravention of the provisions of this act, then uh, the action of confiscation will follow. A new section 114 AC provides for 5 times penalty of the refund claim if such refund is claimed by the party on the basis of any invoice which he has obtained by fraud, collusion, willful misstatement, or suppression of facts with a view to avail and utilize the bogus ITC, which thereafter being used by him for the discharging of the duty liability or tax on goods that are entered for exportation. And very interestingly, please go next slide, please. The the scope of this provision is also being widened to cover the beneficiaries also. So I'll come to that. Now, so in short, what is being done through these amendments? One, the goods for exportation which are being exported, if they are found to have been exported under refund claim, and that claim for refund or remission is found to be claim on the basis of the contravention of any provisions of the law, that is not only custom act, any other law for the time being enforced, mainly GST, then those goods can be confiscated, would become liable for confiscation. Coming to the other penal action, if there is a penal action against a person indulging in claiming the refund, then but refund of the duty paid under Rule 96 of the CGST rules, the goods can be, the refund can be claimed of the tax paid on the exports, read with section 16 subsection 3. Now, if this refund of the ITC which is being claimed, that ITC itself is availed, which is bogus on the basis of the fake invoices, then the person can be made liable for the penalty which can extend to 5 times. Whereas this is a step in the right direction, there is no doubt about it. Two questions would arise here, and we will have to see what happens when the provision is implemented by the department in the right earnest. The first and the foremost is the section 113, the language of the new clause JA is too wide. Suppose there is a goods for export which are being cleared for export on payment of tax, and there is a legal interpretation issue arises about the admissibility of the refund. Can it be said that the exporter has violated any provisions of the act, even though that legal interpretation issue is ruled against him? Can it be said that he has contravened the provisions? One may have to see and be careful about this. We'll have to see how the things pan out in the coming years, days. Another very fundamental issue arises is in the context of new section 114 AC, which provides for the 5 times of the penalty, whether this provision will become a non-starter. And this is a very serious question I am posing. Will this provision become a non-starter? This provision is being introduced under Customs Act. Now, IGST on import is paid under Customs Act, read with Custom Tariff Act. IGST on export is being paid under the IGST Act and not under Custom Act. If my IGST which I am paying by utilizing the ITC, which a person might have availed fraudulently, can the Custom Act prescribe the penalty in respect of such fraudulent availment of the ITC being encased through the exports under refund claim by in any manner? Is it not that such provision ideally should have found place under the IGST Act and not under the Custom Act? We may have a jurisdictional challenge on this count, and I hope that the lawmakers may have to do some serious thinking or reconsider the entire provision. You are all aware, probably, or many of you might be aware about the current ongoing controversy regarding the goods imported under the advance authorization by availing the custom duty and IGST exemption, which and then exported under refund claim under Rule 96. Obviously, the DRI, particularly DRI Kolkata case, is that this refund claim is not admissible because under Rule 9610, uh, you are not entitled as per Rule 9610. If the goods are imported under advance authorization by availing IGST exemption, the the exporter can only export the goods under bond and not under the payment of tax on refund claim because of Rule 9610. And the notification 53 and 54 by 2018, dated 9th October 2018, which have been 54, which has been upheld by the with a retrospective effect from 23rd October 2017 by the Gujarat High Court in a Cosmo Films case recently. The question here is, uh, the case of the department is that this is a double benefit, right? I'll come to that. Now, the short question which I ask myself, and is this: whether the DRI, which is our an authority created and working under custom, can ask for the recovery or payment of the IGST on imports on the ground that the you were not entitled to make the exports under payment claim, under payment of tax and refund claim, and you should have gone under bond only. When the custom notification 79 by 2017 did not actually provide for any such condition. If the custom notification dealing with the advance authorization import would have provided that the person importing the availing the benefit of IGST exemption under this notification should not avail the benefit of exports on payment of tax under refund claim in terms of section 16.3 read with rule 96, matter could have been different. But if there is no violation of customs act, then where is the question of custom authority demanding IGST on imports? GST authorities may proceed against the party as per the law. That is a different matter. I am afraid a similar challenge may lie in the context of this new provision, penal provision of 114 AC. Next.